Hey guys, it's Cam from Craft and Tailored, and in this episode of What Is On My Wrist, we are talking about a 1960s Voit AMF Super Waterproof. The reference is 1573-666, and it's a really interesting watch that comes out of the 1960s. It looks kind of, I would say, almost like Blancpain-ish in its design, but there's some cool history here. I really like the design of the watch. This is a superb example, so really excited to share it with you in this week's episode of What Is On My Wrist. Let's get into the details. These are pretty rare as they didn't make a lot of them, and we'll dive into the history behind Voit and AMF, which is a name that you might already be familiar with. But in terms of its overall design, it kind of feels to me like a Blancpain Aqualung, which we've had in our shop before. Very cool, but also very iconic design in terms of its shape, the composition of the dial and the bezel and things like that. So really kind of a 1960s golden era kind of dive watch. AMF and Voit, if you are a bowling fan and or a vintage diving equipment fanatic, those two names might sound a little bit familiar. But let's talk a little bit about the Voit brand for a little bit and kind of talk about how we ended up here having AMF and Voit in the form of a diving wristwatch that was Swiss made. So Voit was a Los Angeles-based tire retreading company, and in 1922 went on to develop and patent the first inflatable rubber balls, which obviously revolutionized sporting, and the company quickly evolved into one of the largest sporting goods companies in the world. Voit was acquired by AMF in 1957 and pivoted their expertise to recreational diving equipment, among other things. So AMF was a company that specialized in sporting goods equipment and all kinds of things. You might see AMF bowling balls or bowling pins if you've ever been bowling, among a lot of other things. Matter of fact, Voit actually created the duck feet fins, which were one of the first commercially available kind of diving fins of the later part of the 1950s into the 1960s. Let's talk a little bit about AMF for a quick second. AMF, or American Machine Foundry, was a diverse conglomerate that is most known for inventing the automated bowling pin setters and went on to create things such as yachts. So AMF, again, being a very diverse conglomerate of a company, they did a lot of different things, most famously in the professional and or commercial bowling space, where they created bowling balls and bowling pins, and even like the automated, basically, pin setter for bowling machines, gardening tools, diving equipment, obviously. So Voit or Voit AMF created a lot of sporting goods equipment. So let's talk about how we move from bowling pins and bowling balls to wristwatches. AMF Voit made a lot of other sporting goods, and part of their sporting goods line was actually diving equipment. So if you do a search on Voit AMF, you'll see a bunch of diving equipment that was created for recreational diving in kind of the golden age of dive watches and design, whether it be Rolex or Breitling or Omega or whatever. Dive watches kind of seem to stem and develop from the late 1950s into the 1960s, and that's also when we start to see things like the Aqualung and the use of scuba become more commercially popularized, where it was moving out of kind of the military, professional application, was becoming much more recreational. AMF Voit contracted Shield & Company, and Shield & Co. is a well-respected watchmaking house in Switzerland, to manufacture a wristwatch to be sold within their sporting goods stores and in their catalogs alongside of all their other diving equipment. So if you look at the Voit catalogs, what you'll see is like diving compasses, regulators, fins, all that kind of stuff. But one of the accessories that they offered was a wristwatch. The thing that's cool about a lot of these watches, and one of the things that we love so much about the tool watch range of watches, is that it is form meeting design, also meeting function, right? So Voit AMF was offering these watches as essentially a tool, not just a wristwatch, but they were offering this as a tool for timing, decompression, those kinds of things, bottom time, what have you, as a part of their diving equipment line. And as a result of them wanting to provide a quality product, they contracted with Shield & Co. to make a highly dependable but also waterproof watch that would partner and pair with some of the other elements of equipment that they were offering in their catalog. So there's a few different iterations of the Voit or AMF Voit rather diving watches. All of them are pretty elusive due to a very small production range. So again, Voit was contracting through Shield & Co. to produce these watches, but there really wasn't a tremendous demand for them, I would say. They were again kind of sold through the sporting goods stores and through the catalogs, but not necessarily like, marketed as a standalone wristwatch similar to like Rolex or Omega or, the other brands of the era. So out of all of like the different Voit diving watches that we see, the 1573-666 is probably one of the more iconic watches in terms of its shape, its design, and some of the key features within the piece. Again, the watch kind of has almost like a Blancpain-esque kind of look and feel to it. One thing that's really interesting is if you look at the minute hand, you have similar to what you would see on maybe like a Tournic Revel or maybe some of the earlier Blancpains and maybe even like a Benris, where you have basically this minute hand that has sections to the center part of the hand. And I think that was done for two different reasons. One, the hand is quite long and there's a lot of luminous material within the hand. So I think in order to stabilize the luminous material within the hand, they broke that up into sections so that there wasn't one big like chunk of lume in the hand. There were like these little subsections so that the lume would ultimately hold into the hand better. The other thing that's interesting is it provides you with a visual differentiation between the minute and the hour hand. These hands, I wouldn't really call them like sword hands. They're more like baton style hands, but the minute and the hour hand are very similar in their shape. And so I think in order to differentiate between the minute and the hour hand, you have a different design feature within the hand itself so that at a glance you can quickly kind of discern and decipher the difference between the two. It's kind of monochromatic in terms of its overall look. You have this gilt glossy dial that is very, very black. And then you have these gilted kind of big gold hands that sit on the dial. And even though I would say that this falls along the lines of maybe more fine watchmaking, meaning that the dial is gilt and glossy, there definitely is an element of high contrast to the watch while wearing it on wrist. One of the things that I love about this watch is the AMF Voigt logo. There's like this AMF Voigt logo at the center 12 o'clock position on the dial, and then there's like this big, like almost like chevron underneath the AMF Voigt logo, and it's in gold, and it is awesome. It's just really striking. It's really a stunning kind of less is more, and it's almost atomic era in kind of its vibe and its feel. So I really like it a lot. The bezel, so your rotating outer bezel for timing things like decompression and bottom time and etc. is kind of interesting in its design. It's anodized, but at the 12 o'clock position, you have like this crown, which is a really kind of interesting feature. And then the 15 and the 45 are, readable right to left, but then the 30 is basically stacked at like a horizontal, which is kind of an interesting design feature. I guess if you rotate the bezel around, it kind of makes sense, but ultimately it kind of is like an interesting, I guess, overall design to see, normally a 30 that is readable from right to left or in its normal configuration. This one is like tipped on its side, which is kind of an interesting design feature. The watch actually does have a date located at the 3 o'clock position, which I think is kind of interesting. The dating of these watches is somewhat hard just because there's not that many of them, so we kind of guess. I would say that this watch is probably from like 1962 to 1963 based on other comparable examples with similar serial ranges. So from a technical perspective, the watch is a 37 millimeter case width. So the width of the case is 37 millimeters. It kind of doesn't wear big, it kind of doesn't wear small, it kind of wears true to size, like 37 millimeters. I would say a Rolex Submariner, like a 5513 or something like that, would wear maybe a little bit larger. The watch isn't bulky. The watch does have nice kind of long but tapered lugs that kind of mold to the wrist nicely. A very small winding crown, so it's not really a big crown. It's non-locking as well. So again, early in kind of dive watch, you know, technology. Bezel, as we've discussed, is 60 minutes. It's bi-directional, so goes both ways. There's no click spring or anything like that. Really nice domed crystal that sits nicely within the bezel, and the bezel kind of sits nicely up off the watch. It kind of protects the crystal to some extent. What's interesting is we don't see any Shield & Co. branding on the dial or anything like that, but what we do see is Shield & Co. on the inside of the case back, so we'll provide a picture of that to kind of show you that. The movement is a Felsa 4004 automatic, so it's a self-winding Felsa 4004. It's a 17 jewel movement. The rotor in the movement is signed Shield & Co. And another interesting thing is on a lot of watches, one of the things that we look for to authenticate them or kind of to look at maybe some of the past history of just the watch itself without having a lot of information is import stamps. So there's actually an American import code engraved on the movement itself, and you'll see a PWT on one of the bridges one of the plates of the movement, which is pretty cool. Tritium lume plots. It's signed Swiss, but the watch under a Geiger counter does not really show any kind of Geiger reading. And if I look at the watch under a loop with ultraviolet light, it has the consistency and common characteristics of tritium out of that era. So tritium lume on the dial and within the hands. Overall, the watch is in, I would say, pretty mint condition. The watch also is on the original strap. So these watches were supplied originally on the catalog on these Tropic 20 millimeter straps. So really nice Swiss made original strap. This one is not hard, it's still very pliable. And I don't know if this was actual rubber, if this was some kind of like, I don't know, poly material maybe, or a vinyl or something like that. But the watch is on its original strap and remains in really good condition. So in any case, really excited about this. I love vintage divers out of the early 60s. This is a real treat because the watch remains in really, really great condition. But on top of that, you don't see a lot of them outside of maybe like Instagram or that kind of stuff. So I was really excited to bring this into the shop and ultimately share it with you guys. This is a watch that I'm having a little bit of a hard time letting go. I've been trying not to wear it all that much because I really like the watch, and I have a pretty nutty collection, so you can't keep them all. It's not like Pokemon. You cannot catch them all or keep them all. I don't know. I guess it's like Pokemon for me because I'm catching them, but I'm not really able to keep them. I don't want to keep my Pokemon in the cage. I want to get them out to people that enjoy them as much as I do. But in any case, I will provide a link in the description below and above so that you guys can check this out. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're not doing so already, follow us on Instagram for the latest updates and content from us here at Craft and Tailored. And if you've got watch questions, we're here and happy to help. So drop us a line at info@craftandtailored.com. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I will see you in the next one.